All right, so first thing we're going to do is basically the boring part. We'll just create a Django application, and then we'll Dockerize it and then deploy it. So I'm going to do the usual create a virtual environment, Python -m and then source. I'm going to activate it, and I'm going to install Django. Okay, and then I'm also going to create a requirements.txt file. This will we're only going to install Django, but just, to be a little bit more proper, we'll do that. So pip freeze, then we'll redirect the output to the file. So this will only have Django in it. Oh, Django and its dependencies. Okay. And so let's create the app. Django admin start project. We'll just call it API. And then Django admin start app. And this will be Zillow. All right, so a couple things we're going to have to do. So API is the top level, so I'm going to add our app to the settings.py. We're also going to need to change this. So when we deploy it, we'll need to change this, but I won't worry about that for right now. Okay, so that should be good. We're actually not going to use a database, but we'll leave that there for now. And so the URLs, we're just gonna have one route for now. Just to make things simpler, we're just gonna have one route. Our API just gonna have one. So nothing. We'll go to, that will be not URLs.py. It's like sorry, I have a cold. My brain's a little off. Is this right? Zillow.urls. This is how you do it.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'm gonna copy this and go into the app, create urls.py. Don't need that. Don't need that. And again, we're just gonna have one path, so it's gonna be this base route. And we're gonna have a view. So from .views import and the Zillow data. So I'll just call it get data. It's not a very descriptive name, but it'll be good for now. So get data. All right, and then in the view, so again, I don't need to worry about models or admin because we're not using a database. So def get data, and everything is going to take the request. Okay, so we've got the basic framework set up, but now we need to figure out what data we're going to pull in. So I'm going to go grab this link here. Okay, so this is the kind of aggregated data. So if you can't use the full API, which gives you very detailed stuff, this is maybe this is good enough for some things, maybe it's not, but we'll go ahead and use it just because it was an example. So this is all aggregated data. Excuse me. All right. So home, let's do rentals inventory. We'll just do inventory. It doesn't really, I don't think it really matters, but um, so for sale inventory, all homes monthly. I'm not sure what smooth means, but okay. So I choose Metro US. I'm going to download this, and then I will try to shove this in here. We can take a look at it, and it's a mess. Very difficult to see what the structure is. But if you do a triple click or whatever on here, you can see that this is a row. So this is actually all of the columns. So we have region ID, size rank. This stuff makes sense as column names, but dates are also used as column names. So this is aggregated data by month, aggregated inventory by month. So for every major metro area, New York, LA, Chicago, blah, 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 it will tell you how many, basically, I think how many properties were for sale during that month. So for 2018, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes up to December of last year. So they don't have the current month's data, which makes sense. Okay, so we've got this, but we can't really do a whole lot with CSV file directly. So what we're gonna have to do is turn this into a JSON file, basically. So we're gonna take the CSV file and convert it into JSON, and there's a few ways we can do that. I'm just gonna write a quick helper script, which is probably not gonna be part of our application, but we'll just kind of assume we have the JSON. So let's do. All right, and I'm gonna import CSV, and with open, and then I'm gonna get the okay. So I've got the name of the file. I could rename it to something more user friendly, but I'll leave it for now. And we just are going to be actually we're just going to be reading it. And I want to use the dict reader just because that's easy to it's easy to convert to JSON. So I'll do CSV dict reader, and because there's a title, I should just be able to pass it there directly. So print. So this is going to give me like a dict reader object, but I want to pull it out. So I want to have an array of objects. So I can so this will be these are cities, I guess. So each object will be a metro area. So I'll just do city or C in reader, and then I'll print housing list. We'll jump up a level and run the process. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff there, but it looks like this is what we want. And so there's a list of objects. Now I'm also going to have to, because it's JSON, I'm going to give it like I'm going to wrap the whole thing in I'm going to make it a dictionary. Equals data, and then housing list. Okay, so now this should be basically a nice JSON object that we can use in our application. So I want to write this to a JSON file. I'm going to import JSON. And then I'm going to write that. So with open housing data.json. And we're going to write this time. So I will do, let's see. I think I should just be able to write everything. So let's see if that works. That's right. And then I'll pass it in data. And we'll run this and see what that looks like. So I'm trying to pass, I have this dictionary, so I'm gonna have to convert this to JSON. So JSON dot dumps. Yes. Let's try this. I'm gonna take that object and convert it to JSON. And then I can see this here. So this is not pretty looking, but it should work. So I have this outer level, it's all formatted in a dictionary. I have this key, and then everything else is just a list of key value pairs. So that should get us what we want. So I'm going to take this housing data and just kind of shove it up here. Actually, maybe I could leave it. I'm going to try leaving it at the top level. We'll see if that works. Okay. All right. So I don't need this process anymore. I'll keep it around just in case we need to make any tweaks later. But now we have the data that we're going to serve up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to import JSON as well. And then I'm going to read from housing data. Read from housing data, and then return that as a JSON object. So with open. I'll put this up here for now. I'm gonna have to do something else, but we'll leave that for now. Okay. Okay. So I've got get data, and then I open the file, and now I'm going to read it. So f dot read, and let's see if I can just pass it in directly. Dot. Yeah, I think loads. I think this should work. We'll see. All right. And then I'll print contents. All right, so I'm going to run the server. Okay, so let's see. Let's cd. Okay, I'm gonna run the server, and then I'm actually gonna just use curl here. Okay, so we got an error. There's no such file, housing data. Excuse me. No such file here. So what we're gonna have to do is look at our settings.py, and we're gonna grab this baster, and this is kind of how Django. This is going to be the base path for anything that you do in your app. So we'll take this and then we'll tack on the relative path. So to do that, let me just see. Uh, see here.
Would you import the OS and do the OS path
You
kind of thing?
you could do that, but this is already available to you. Let me just see here. Right at where you import the settings. Let me just see if I can remember. Django dot. Okay, I think it's Django.conf config import settings. And then, so instead of this path here, I will do what's here. Let's do. I got this copied out right here. os.path.join. So I do os.path.join, and then settings dot base URL, and then the relative path is going to be the name of the application. So Zillow, and then slash housing data dot JSON. Okay. So this should give us this should make everything work. Base URL baster. Okay, I'll run this again. And then okay. So this works, but then it broke later because I'm not returning an HTTP response object. So that's part of the rule of that's like the Django contract. Your views have to return HTTP response objects. So let's look up Django JSON response. There is a built-in. So we can use this. We can actually import JSON response. And I'm going to not print this anymore, but return JSON response with contents. And we'll see if that works. Okay, so this is working now. I'm actually getting the JSON back. And if we want to double check that, we can see it in the browser. Might be a little easier to see all that stuff. So this is a lot of junk we're getting back, but that's fine for now. Okay. So we have our data, and this is now going to give us the data we want. We can tweak this, but for now, I think this is fine. So this is running locally. What we want to do now is Dockerize it and then deploy it. All right, so I'm going to clean up some of this stuff. We don't need that anymore. We don't need that anymore. Okay. And then this is also something we're going to have to do anyway, so I'm just going to do it now. So this is the simplest thing, just allow any host. Okay, I'll save this. Okay. All right, so now we're going to have to build a Docker file. I'll stop the server and let's create a Docker file. So the first thing we need to think about is what is our base image going to be? So we have a Django application, and we know that we're going to need Python to do everything. So a base image with Python in it makes sense. So I'll go to Docker Hub. Yeah, we'll take a look at this stuff in a second, but I'll do Python. Here's the official image for Python. And I don't, it doesn't really matter for our purposes. So I'll just pull the latest. I'll just use Docker pull Python. And the way we write that out here is from Python. And implicitly, it's going to do latest. So if you don't specify a tag, then it's going to get the latest tag. Okay. So that's okay. So that's the base image we have. And once we have that, we should be able to run everything. But we're going to have to install all of the requirements that we need. So we can assume we have Python. So I should be able to run, just going to execute a command. I'm going to do run and then pip install -r requirements.txt. So this is the same as, it's the same thing you would do locally if you were pulling down a repo and then trying to run it. Okay. So I'm going to install requirements.txt, and then I'm going to copy over everything that's in my app. So I'll create a working directory. You don't have to do this, but workdir. So workdir is going to basically be if you don't specify a path, it's going to assume that this is the base path. So I could do /app, and now anything that I do, any command that I run in the container will assume that I'm starting at /app. So you don't have to do that, but you can. All right, so work there /app, and then I'm going to copy. I'm going to copy over everything in API. And I can just use dot. So from API, everything that's in my local container, I'm going to copy it into dot, which will be the working directory inside of my container. So this local stuff, all my code, will get copied into that. So I just realized that I won't be able to install the requirements until I copy it over. So right now, my container won't have access to requirements.txt. So I'm going to have to copy. We'll move this up. And copy. Okay. So I'm going to copy over requirements.txt into /app in the container. Then I'm going to pip install the requirements, which is basically just Django. And then I'm going to copy over all my actual code. And then for Django application, so at this point, the container should have everything it should have everything it needs. It's got Python, you've installed all your dependencies, and now you have your code there. So in order to actually run the code, you're gonna have to run migrations. We'll add another run command, and that will be Python. Oops. Okay, so Python manage dot. Oops. So from here, I think I'm gonna have to go to API. So API / manage dot pi, and then make. I'll just do migrate. Okay, so you know that will work. And then, so I now have everything set up, and now I just want to run the server. So the final command I'm going to do is what I want to run when you actually want to create an instance. So by default, the thing that I want to happen when you create an instance of this image is that it will just run the server. And that you do with cmd. And you pass it a list. So Python API / manage dot pi. And for now, I'll just show you so the run server. And I'm going to specify this here 0.0.0.0/8000. There's a couple other ways to do this, but this will work. So I'm going to run, I'm going to execute the run server command. So this is just the development server. Later on, we'll see how you really want to do this. You actually want to run it. So in any event, this is just a development server, but we're going to kind of ignore the extra complication for now. All right, so I have my Docker file created. So now what I want to do is actually build the image. So I want to build the image and make sure that it works. So you do that Docker build, and then -t. I'm going to give it a name. This will be Django API, and then dot. I'm in API. I think that's actually not going to work. I'm in API. So I'm going to go to the level where my Docker file is. And then I can do Docker build -t. The name will be Django API, and then dot. So Docker will look in the current directory for a Docker file, and then it'll build it from there. So I'm going to run this, and we'll see if anything breaks. Okay, so we got an error. So internal load metadata, blah, blah, blah. Okay, unauthorized. Let's see. That's interesting. How to fetch OAuth token. I shouldn't need to be authorized. This is a public repo, so just try that one more time. Huh. All right, let me just try executing this command right here. I'll just pull Docker pull Python latest.
Is it Python? Does it know your alias for Python? Would it have to be Python 3? I'm just a thought.
Yeah, so it shouldn't. So a couple issues. The main thing is that it shouldn't be checking for authorization because this is a public repo. And so I'm wondering if I somehow, yeah, it's a bit odd. Let me try from a different Python. Let's do Docker run. Okay, so let me try just logging in, Docker login. So I did change my password this morning, so that could be it. Username. And the password, what was that? I used Google to create me a password, dang it. Sorry, minor annoyance here. All right, so let's see if that works. Okay. So that is working now. So yeah, sorry about that. So you shouldn't have to be logged in at all, or as I know, but okay. So that should be working now. So now I'm going to build this image. So it's going through all the steps. So because the layers were cached, it went very quickly, but if this is the first time you're running it, it might take a while to download everything. So I still got an error. You can see for every step. So from Docker latest, blah, blah, blah. So that's 1 of 6. And then work there, that's another step right here. And then copy the requirements.txt, that's another step. And then run pip install requirements.txt, another one. And then copy. And then the last one here, run, blah, blah, blah. All right. So I'll just try doing this. I'll build it again. Okay. So that works now. So now I should have this this image built. So I have a container which has not only my application on it, but an operating system and all of the dependencies that are needed for there. So Docker images, and I can see that this is the one that I just created. So Django API. So if I were to run it, if I run this image, it should execute this command. So Docker run Django API. And now it's just sitting there running. So if I try to curl, I get failed to connect. So there's a minor issue here where it's the container is running. The container is really running. You can see it right there, but it's operating, internal. So this image kind of is isolated from the rest of my system, and that includes the ports. So the container is running and it's listening on a port, but it's listening on a port kind of on an internal network. So if I want to be able to access the container from my host machine, from the the laptop that I'm using right now, I'm gonna have to map the ports. So when I run it, I'll just have to specify a port mapping. So -p, and then the first one is the port on my machine, which could be anything. I'll just use 7,000, but it could be anything. And then here's the port on the container that that my application is listening on. So now if I run this, and I'm gonna go to port 7000 here, I get my response back. And I can do the same thing here. So localhost 7000, and I get that stuff. So now I have my application written, and now I've containerized it. So it's in a container, which means that I have additional flexibility. So it's like, I have a super virtual environment now. So anyone who wants to run my code, they can be, even more certain that it's going to work the way it does on my local machine. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is push up this image to Docker Hub. So just the way that, if I develop a Django application, I would want to push it up to GitHub. I didn't do that in this case, but you'd want to push it up to GitHub so it's available for you or anyone else later. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay, so I'll check out my repositories. So I have a couple repositories here, just like GitHub. So these are repositories. Let me see here. All right. All right. So I can get more information about this particular repository, and here's the if I wanted to push, if I had a local update and I wanted to push to this again, I would do Docker push and then blah blah blah. So my username on Docker Hub is Chad Mowbray. So this would be just like your GitHub username. So anything you push is going to be associated with your account. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and create. I'm going to push my image to Docker Hub. So Docker push. Let me see. I think I'm going to have to do Docker images. Okay, so I have the Django API. So I'm going to do. Okay, we'll leave that for now. All right. Okay, so we've been going for 40 minutes. Do you guys want to? So this is fairly tedious. There's a lot of steps, and we're now going to deploy this. So do you guys want to take a break now, or do you want to keep pushing through?
Try to push through, in my opinion.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question, Chad?
Yeah.
Why do you use run compared to command or CMD? What's the differences there?
So CMD is how you define this in the Docker file that you're creating. So your Docker file is the description of the image that you want to build. But when you actually run it, so you can think of run as in like create an instance of my image. So when you create an instance, it's actually going to execute this command. So when you build the image itself, if we can scroll up here, this line doesn't actually get executed. So you can see, creates the working directory, copies over, it runs pip install, it copies stuff, and then it runs migration, but that's it. So this is 6 of 6 right here. So it doesn't actually execute this line when it's building the image. So this line is basically when someone creates an instance of my container, i.e. they do run, Docker run, then execute this command. Does that make sense?
Yes, it definitely does. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so now I'm gonna go to AWS. Put this off screen for a second. Okay, so I've logged into my AWS account and I'm using all of the free tier stuff. So you can go, so right now I'm at the EC2 console, but there's a whole bunch of services. So S3 is a common one that it's likely that some of you will use. Excuse me. So it's just storage. But I want to go to EC2 for now. So EC2, you can just search for it as well. EC2. So this is the basic, compute instance in AWS. All right, so I'm going to launch an instance. And I can give it a name. So my Django API server. And then from there, you'll choose the image. So this is kind of like Docker in itself, right? So we're not creating a bare metal server. We're kind of, this instance is going to be basically a virtual instance anyway. Okay, so there's a few, free. There's a whole bunch of official free base images, AMIs that you can choose. I'm just going to go with Amazon Linux, and you can see that it's free tier eligible right here. Blah blah blah. This is the architecture or something. I have a note in the README. So if you're running on an M1, then you'll need to tweak your build command slightly, but that's fine. All right, so the instance type, I'm just going to use this as well. The key pair login. So a key pair login, this is a public private key pair. So this is just for security purposes. So what Amazon's going to do is when it creates the instance, it's going to store the public key. So there's like a key pair. One is public, one is private. It's going to store the public key on your host machine, on the EC2 instance, and then you keep on your local machine. You keep the private key, and that's going to enable you to log in to your remote EC2 instance. You don't really need to understand any of the magic here, but I'm going to create a new key pair, and I can give it a name, Django API key. And I'm just going to keep all these other options the same, create a key pair. And I'm only going to get one because I only need the private key, but Amazon is going to install the corresponding public key on the machine. So I'm going to pull this down, and I'm just going to put this right here. So you can see that this looks like nonsense. You don't need to worry about it. Okay. So now I'm going to make sure that these settings are very open. So allow HTTPS, allow HTTP traffic, blah, 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 allow SSH. You can also be more strict here. So SSH traffic, that's what you're going to use to really go into the machine and make changes. So right here, I could use my IP or custom IP, blah, blah, blah. For security, it would be best to use my IP, but I'm just going to keep it anywhere. And then the rest of the settings should be fine. I'm going to launch the instance. So it could take a few minutes to spin up. And here's a description. So it's pending right now. Yeah, it could take a minute to spin up. So meanwhile, I'm gonna have to do one other thing. I'm gonna go to the instance and security. And I have this already, excuse me, already set up, but you'll just need to double check and make sure that you can accept incoming connections on port 80. So this is normal unencrypted HTTP traffic, and here's encrypted HTTP traffic. So if not, you'll have to add a rule for that. Okay, so that should be okay. And now my instance state is running. So I have this machine set up. It should be running on the cloud now. So what I want to do is connect there, connect to the instance, and then install Docker. Because by default, this is just a base, it's just a base image. It's just got a bare operating systems and not much is installed on it. So I'll put connect here. And then it kind of tells you the steps to go through, which is very clear. So one, I'm going to change the permissions of this key right here. Okay. So that's just a requirement. And then I'm going to connect here. So I can copy here. So I'm going to SSH and then -I. This is going to send along this is basically like a login. And then I'm connecting to this instance. So here's the IP of my instance. So copy that, and then I'll go here. And then it's going to ask me, are you sure, blah, blah, blah. You just type in yes. So now I'm actually on my remote host there. Okay, so once I'm on the remote host, I'm going to have to install Docker here. So I can see, for example, ls. Anyway, so I think I have the steps right here. I'm going to copy this. This is from the README. So this will install Docker. Yes, yes. Okay, so Docker should be installed here. So what I'm going to do now is on my local machine, I want to push up my image to my personal GitHub account. So I forget the command off the top of my head. So okay, so first I'm gonna have to tag my image because I have to add my username. I have to add my username. That's just a rule that Docker has. So I'm gonna look up the images. Docker images. We have the Python Django API. So Docker tag Django API, and that should be my user account / Django API. And if I check my images again, now I have this named. So I should be allowed to push this. So if I tried to push just Django API to Docker Hub, it would look for an account called Django API. So that's not gonna work. That's why I have to preface it with your name. So I can tag, I'm basically renaming my image. All right. And then from there, I can do Docker push Chad Mowbray / Django API. So just like you do git push, you do Docker push. This will take a minute. All right, so now I'm going to go just double check my account and make sure that that is there. So this got added. And it tells me that if I want to push it again, I can add a new tag. So this is like a version basically. But I'll stick to this for now. So now that this is available kind of to the open internet, I can also pull it from my machine. Okay. So I'm going to do Docker pull Chad Mowbray / Django API. Let's see. Let me double check this. Log out and log in again. Okay, so I'm gonna have to make sure that the Docker daemon is running. Let me go back here. Should have done this. Let me try this. All right, now I'll try pulling it. Good. Okay, so I just needed to run the command to make sure that Docker was actually running here. So now I'm pulling that image. So I'm on my remote machine in ECS, and I'm pulling down the image that I had just pushed up to Docker Hub. So you could do the exact same thing with GitHub, right? If I had pushed my code up to GitHub, as long as I had Git installed on this machine, I could pull, I could clone down a repository. Okay, so now I'm going to do Docker images, and I have this image now. So this image now exists on my on that server. So now what I want to do is run it. So I have the image. I want to actually run it so that I can make requests. So Docker run, and I'm gonna have to map the port just like I did locally. -P, and I'm gonna try port 80. So 8,000. So the local, so my host machine, port 80. So this is the standard HTTP port. Is going to map to the containers 8,000 port, which again comes from right here. And then I'm going to do Chad Mowbray, the name of the image. Okay, so now this is running again. So what I'm going to try to do is make a request to that server. So I'm going to go, oops. Okay, so I have the public IP address. So I should be able to go here. Let's see. Let's go here. So curl. And I just got the actual information there. What do I do without specifying the port? Yeah. So, excuse me. So now I'm actually making that request to the remote server, which is running my container. So as long as I develop this locally and it works, I can be pretty sure that it's going to work on the container. So when I deploy it, there's there's less possible variation. And that's basically it.
Very cool.
Any questions? I know that's it's kind of boring and there's a lot of steps and it's very tedious. But that's kind of how deployment is. This is basically like DevOps stuff.
It still surprises me that Amazon offers compute for free.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a trap of sorts. So, you definitely get vendor lock-in. Once you get familiar with a particular cloud vendor like AWS or whatever, you're pretty unlikely to want to switch. So they give people free stuff so they can learn it, and then once they learn it, they're probably not going to switch.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I had a question. So for this, we did just one path, but when we write more paths, will those automatically get pulled over too, since we're just kind of identifying the app and not individual segments of it? Or would you have to explicitly say something that you want those included?
So if we wanted to add like /users / whatever, like, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because right now we just have it, so it's just at the base there.
Yeah. It would work just as fine because the app is routing. So it'll take in an incoming request here, and then it's still going through URLs and blah blah blah. So our application is still parsing that stuff. So it would, yeah. And actually, the last night when I was running through this, I actually added a query parameter option, but for the interest of time, so it works fine if you add like a query parameter, which is part of the URL, right? I'm going to show you that real quick. Let me see, go to views. Okay. Okay, so here's an example that uses query parameters. So again, we have that huge just monster chunk of JSON. But if we wanted, this is a very primitive search function basically. So you could search by state. So it might not be obvious looking at this massive data, but there's a region name. Let me see. So for example, this is New York. There's Texas, right? So La Mesa, Texas, blah, blah, blah. So if you wanted to filter this by a particular state, we can pull this out of the query param. So this is just normal Django stuff. So this is how we're going to pull out the query parameters. So request.get. So this is normal Python, but get, and this should have a query parameter. So this is expecting www.example.com/?state equals mi. So that's the format that this particular thing is expecting. And then if the query parameter is included in the request, then it's just going to filter that, blah, blah, blah. Otherwise, it will return. So we can actually try this out. So I'm going to stop this, our remote server, and exit. Actually, I don't need to exit. So now I'm going to go here and I'm going to rebuild the image because I changed our code, and then push it up again. And it'll automatically pick up the latest tag. So I'm not going to explicitly version this. It'll automatically use the latest. Okay. So new API, blah, blah, blah. Docker build dash T Django API. Let's do Chad Mowbray. I can skip the other step. So Django API, and then that would be dot. So I'm gonna rebuild everything. So it's gonna be the same Docker file, but the code has changed. So I'm copying over the code here. So Docker will also try really hard to to cache stuff, so it doesn't have to re-download everything all the time. But as soon as you have a difference, so you'll see that all this stuff will be the same. It'll happen like in a snap, but everything will have to rerun after a change. So from here down, it's gonna have to rerun. So I'll do this. You can see that this was cached up until here, and then because our code was different, this is not cached anymore. Okay, so I rebuilt the image. So now I could test this locally, but I'm going to skip that, and I'm going to push this Docker push blah 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 blah. So this is automatically picking up the latest tag. So it's kind of going to demote the older version. You could also use explicit versioning, as I said. Okay, so now that new version is pushed up here. So I'm going to go to my remote server, and I'm going to pull down this again. So I got a new version. So now I have an updated version of my application, and now I'm going to run it. Okay. And then I should be able, let's go make the curl request. Slash question mark state equals search for Michigan. Let me see. So I copied and pasted, but I didn't call this thing contents. Anyone remember what I called it? I called it data. All right, so I'll make that change real quick. Data. And I'm going to run through this process yet again. So I'll rebuild it again. Tag. Okay, so I'm going to rebuild it. And then I'm going to push it again. Okay, and then I'm going to pull it over here on my server. Now I should have the updated version, and I'm going to actually run it now. Okay, so it should be running on my remote server. Now I'm going to make the same request, this time using the query parameter. Let's see. Anyway, this is not the important part. I copied and pasted this, so I have to play around. It's something simple, but yeah. So I won't spend any more time trying to get this other thing to work, but you can do that easily. filtered. Type error list indices must be integers or slices, not string. Anyway, I might play around with this for a sec, but so are there any questions about that process?
I have a more of a general question.
Sure.
Just trying to understand the whole Docker container. So when we know how to make our Django applications, and when you copy the requirements text, that basically copy into the container or into the image later in the container, everything that comes with Django, all the packages, or do you, for example, for a database, let's say you create a database in Django, does
Yeah.
that automatically get put into a container? Or you need a separate container for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the default Django setup is going to use the SQLite database, which is basically like a local file. So in that case, it would live inside the container. But the reality is that what you would actually do in a more professional deployment is have a Postgres container and a Django container, and then you have to make them interact. So that's actually the third Docker lecture. We'll get into that. How you can there's something called Docker Compose, which lets you kind of create a full app that uses multiple containers, like for example, Django and Postgres and some kind of like a React container that's going to serve your application.
Okay, and then one more. When we're trying to push and then we want to ignore, the git ignore file,
Yeah.
does that work the same way?
So git ignore wouldn't really apply to Docker, but there is something called the Docker ignore. So here, for example, since we're working in a container and containers are disposable, basically disposable operating systems or disposable things, you don't have to create a virtual environment. So we're just installing everything globally on this operating system. So you don't really need to worry about git ignore or anything like that.
Hey, Chad.
Yeah.
Now that your API is, well, I guess as first, is your API now ready for public use?
Yeah. I mean, you guys could go here. I mean, I'll copy this in here. You guys should be able to hit it.
So that's part of the URL.
Yeah, this is the IP address. So you could you can map this to kind of if you've ever heard of DNS.
Yes.
That's so the next step in making this user friendly would be to kind of register a domain name, and then you would associate that domain name with this IP address. So if someone were going there, they wouldn't have to know, oh, this is the IP address. They just type in, example.com or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So for example, you would have this, and now you have an API, and you would probably also want to restrict it a little bit, but then you have your React front end, for example, that makes a request here and gets some data. So yeah, this is how you can create your own API.
Is that also available in
Uh.
AWS?
Sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Oh, sorry, that housing data.json.
Yes.
Can we access that through AWS? Like,
Uh,
for example, we just want to add one row. Do we have to like push and then pull?
I mean for this JSON file.
Yeah.
So one thing that you could do is save this JSON file to an S3 bucket, and then access it through the S3 API.
Okay. Alright, thank you.